Welcome to the Past in Pictures channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A historical punishment method at Bilibid prison in Manila reveals the extreme harshness of the penal system in the Philippines under Spanish rule. The documentary record shows the severity of this historical way of carrying out the maximum sentence, used until the early 20th century. Japanese troops commit large-scale violence against Chinese civilians during the Nanjing Massacre. This record from 1937, with trials continuing until 1948, documents war crimes against the civilian population and stands as a powerful historical piece of evidence of what happened in China. Generals Eisenhower and Patton watch in 1945 as camp survivors show the inhumane conditions they endured. The record captures the shock on the Allied commanders' faces as they confronted the reality of persecution soon after liberation. Discovered by Allied troops in 1945, piles of bags filled with gold and cash cover the vast space of the Merker salt mine. This striking underground storehouse served as a hiding place for wealth looted by the German regime during the Second World War, revealing the scale of what was amassed. A punitive device is installed at the Cook County Jail in 1927, marking a transition in how capital punishment was carried out in Chicago. The photograph records the equipment in a stark concrete room, representing the era's penal technology and the United States criminal justice system in the late 1920s. The intense heat from a nuclear test in Nevada in 1955 caused severe damage to vegetation and objects about 6.5 feet from the center of the blast. The record documents the bomb's immediate thermal power, capable of rapidly destroying organic material within the heat zone, even before the shockwave arrived. A stone slab deep inside Mammoth Cave served as a grim resting place for tuberculosis patients who did not survive between 1842 and 1843. The record recalls a failed medical experiment that sought a cure in the damp cave air, leaving only the rock today as a witness to this tragic scientific attempt. In 1944, about 57,000 German prisoners of war were forced to march through Moscow after the crushing defeat of Operation Bagration. The parade was a display of Soviet strength to the world, followed by water trucks washing the streets as a symbolic gesture after the German colon passed. Emergency crews in London worked to pull a woman from the rubble of her home after a V-2 rocket strike in 1944. George Rogers' lens captured not only the damage from Germany's long-range weapon, but also the dedication of rescuers in the final months of the war. On Wall Street, the wreckage of a destroyed automobile shows the aftermath of the September 1920 attack in New York. The explosion was caused by a horse-drawn wagon loaded with explosives that struck the heart of the financial district. A German woman is publicly shamed and expelled from her community in 1942 for having a relationship with a Polish man. Under the German regime, such relationships were harshly punished under racial purity laws, leading to severe penalties meant to isolate and humiliate those who defied state doctrine. Standing as a historical symbol of oppression, the Bloody Tower of Thessaloniki was linked to abuses and loss of life for prisoners under Turkish rule in 1920. The record recalls violations within its walls before the monument was later reshaped into a Greek historical landmark. German leaders are photographed at a dining table during the Nuremberg trials in 1945. Under constant watch, the defendants received simple rations supplied by the Allied army, highlighting the contrast between their former power and their status as prisoners awaiting judgment for war crimes. During the Gallipoli campaign in 1915, an Ottoman artilleryman is seen carrying massive artillery shells on his back. The image reveals the extreme physical effort demanded in the Dardanelles fighting. Soldiers crossed rough terrain to keep coastal defenses supplied against Allied forces in the First World War. Desmond Doss stands atop the Maeda Escarpment in Okinawa, where he rescued 75 men in 1945. Under intense fire and refusing to carry a weapon for religious reasons, the combat medic lowered each soldier down the cliff with ropes, a feat that earned him the Medal of Honor. In 1935, changing keepers at Bishop Rock Lighthouse in the Isles of Scilly required a risky maneuver because of rough seas in the lighthouse's vertical tower. The record shows a keeper being hoisted by ropes between the boat and the lighthouse entrance. It was the only way to maintain the rotation at one of the most isolated points on the British coast. In 1979, hydroplane driver Dean Chenoweth is photographed at the instant Miss Budweiser lifts off and flips during a race. The image became famous for showing the boat nearly vertical seconds before impact. Chenoweth survived the crash, underscoring the level of risk in this kind of competition. After a Dakota aircraft crashed at South Ruislip in 1946, crew and passengers stunned observers by surviving without injury. The historical record captures the extraordinary moment when everyone walked out of the wrecked fuselage through the main door, defying the severity of the accident in England. During the Blitz in 1940, a Londoner improvised a bed by sleeping inside a stone sarcophagus in a church. The record illustrates both desperation and resilience, as people sought any solid shelter to protect themselves from German night bombing. Residents of Humby in East Lothian inspect the wreckage of a downed German Heinkel He-111 bomber in 1939. It was the first enemy aircraft to fall on British soil during the Second World War, becoming an immediate symbol of war, reaching rural communities in Scotland. A service member maintains Browning defensive systems inside a bomber ball turret during the 1940s show. The record highlights the extremely cramped space where the gunner worked, requiring only smaller men to fill the position and operate the equipment in flight. Deck crews rushed to rescue a pilot from a fighter beginning to burn after a forced landing on the deck of the aircraft carrier United States ship Enterprise during the Second World War. The record captures the speed and danger of naval operations, where sailors faced heat and the risk of explosions to save airmen within seconds. A mechanic services an engine in mid-air, balancing on the external gondola of an airship in the 1930s. The record is striking for the height and lack of safety equipment, showing how engineers reached exterior areas on narrow walkways to keep the craft running hundreds of yards above the ground. A teacher administers a disciplinary correction to a student in a classroom in the early 20th century. The image portrays a time when paddles and rods were considered normal discipline in many schools. Over time, education reforms moved to ban these punishments and prioritize modern teaching methods. During the harsh hunger winter of 1944 to 1945 in the Netherlands, countless children wore spoons pinned to their clothes as a sign of readiness and hope. This touching gesture shows the desperate fight to survive in a time of extreme shortage when any chance of food was a precious chance at life. A long line of unemployed men in hardship stretches down a New York sidewalk waiting for a basic ration of bread and soup in 1932. The scene is one of the most powerful images of the Great Depression, capturing economic strain and the loss of stability for thousands of workers during the peak of the financial crisis in the United States. During the First World War, ambulance trains were adapted to carry evacuated soldiers from the front lines to rear hospitals. The record shows rail cars fitted with bunks and medical supplies, acting as mobile hospitals that were essential in saving thousands of lives under extreme conditions on Europe's tracks. Students at the McCormick Open Air School in Chicago are seen resting in heavy sleeping bags during the winter of 1917. At the time, fresh cold air was believed to be the most effective treatment against tuberculosis, leading schools to keep windows open even in freezing temperatures to strengthen children's immune systems. A Liberian army soldier appears in a record tied to a power shift on a beach in Monrovia in 1980. The record captures the moment after the coup led by Samuel Doe, symbolizing political rupture and the start of a period of instability in the African country. John Johnston, who inspired the Jeremiah Johnson legend, became a mythical figure of the Old West in the 19th century. According to popular accounts, he was said to have entered a 25-year conflict with the Crow Nation after the death of his wife and child, earning his nickname due to claims that he carried out extreme acts against defeated enemies as a form of insult and intimidation. Sergeant Boston Corbett of the 16th New York Cavalry became known for shooting and bringing down John Wilkes Booth, responsible for the death of Abraham Lincoln in 1865. He disobeyed orders to take Booth alive and later said that God's providence guided him to fire through a crack in the burning barn. In the late 19th century, Salvation Army shelters in London offered box beds for 4 pence a night. They were wooden boxes lined up on the floor where unhoused people could sleep lying down, with a waterproof tarp serving as a blanket. The scene exposes the harsh reality of poverty in the Victorian era. For only 7 cents, workers in New York could rent canvas bunks at the Canvas Palace in 1898. Happy Jack's improvised lodging reveals the unstable reality of housing for immigrants and poor laborers in the city at the turn of the century. The criteria for Trans World Airlines flight attendants in 1945 required applicants to be unmarried women between 21 and 26 years old, with weight proportional to height. Beyond a polished appearance and a strict weight limit, the rules of the time often required them to leave the job if they chose to marry. Chinese workers strained to pull boats through the shallow waters of the Yangtze River in 1946 through the lens of Dmitry Kessel. The image documents exhausting physical labor and traditional river navigation methods that still persisted in post-war China, where human pulling power was essential to overcome currents and sandbars. Human muscle drives a boat through Dutch canals in this 1910 image. The record shows the hard reality of water transport before mechanization, when men and women replaced animal power to move goods along the Netherlands' trade routes. In 1910, Shooting the Chutes was the headline attraction at Luna Park in Coney Island. The record shows boats sliding down a steep ramp into a lagoon, symbolizing the golden age of American amusement parks and the early 20th century hunger for thrills. In 1921, a stunt performer is photographed at the exact moment he jumps from an airplane into a moving convertible. The image reveals the boldness of early movie stunts, done without visual effects or modern safety equipment. Everything depended on precision and extreme courage. In Germany in 1912, mailbags are loaded onto an airplane on one of the country's first postal flights. The scene marks the birth of airmail in the pioneering era of aviation, when flying was still new to the public. From then on, messages would travel far faster than by land or sea. At the start of the 20th century, specifically in 1902, New York City already had a fleet of electric taxis. The record shows these quiet, emissions-free vehicles lined up on the streets long before gasoline engines took over. At the time, electric cars were favored by the elite because they were cleaner and easier to operate. A British military aircraft is positioned in front of St. Paul's Cathedral in London during the 1940s. The image appears to come from a war exhibit or fundraising drive, contrasting aviation technology of the time with the cathedral's historic architecture, which survived heavy Second World War bombing. Instead of a traditional silk ribbon, the opening of the Golden Gate Bridge in 1937 was marked by cutting a silver chain. Using blowtorches to break the links symbolized engineering strength and the official opening of the structure to pedestrian and vehicle traffic, celebrating one of the greatest architectural feats of the 20th century. During construction of the Golden Gate Bridge, a safety net was installed to protect workers operating at great heights. This innovative measure saved the lives of 19 men who fell during the project, who became known as members of the Safety Net Club. Workers assemble the outer fins of the Space Needle in 1961, balancing hundreds of yards above Seattle. The image captures a dangerous moment in building this modern architecture icon, done without the safety gear that would be expected today, as the structure was finished for the 1962 World's Fair. This unusual angle captures the inside of the Space Needle structure from below, with two workers hanging on the right side. The image emphasizes the tower's colossal scale and the courage of the crew assembling metal components at great heights. In 1960, Greco-Roman wrestling competitors face off beneath the massive vaults of the Basilica of Maxentius in the Roman Forum. The setting chosen for the Rome Olympics created a striking link between modern sport and classical antiquity. Imperial ruins became a monumental arena celebrating the city's historic legacy. The contrast between past and future appears in this 1980 photograph in Baikonur, where a camel and its owner pose beside a Soyuz rocket. The image preserves an unusual meeting between centuries-old steppe traditions and space exploration. In 1975, a chess class in Pskov in the Soviet Union brings together dozens of children focused over their boards. The scene reflects how chess was encouraged as a mental sport and built into school education. It also served as a symbol of national prestige, helping produce generations of grandmasters and champions. In the past, television network logos were physical three-dimensional objects made of metal, wood, or plaster. Before computer graphics existed, cameras filmed these real models or painted cards to create identification bumpers that appeared between programs. At 14 years old, young David Bowie poses in 1961 with a style still far from the chameleon-like personas that would later define his career. This intimate record captures an ordinary teenager years before he became one of the greatest cultural and musical icons of the 20th century. Famed novelist Agatha Christie glides over the water in 1922, recognized as the first Western woman to surf standing up on a board. The record shows an adventurous, pioneering side of the writer during her time in South Africa and Honolulu, long before she became the master of mystery. At 7 years old, young Babe Ruth appears on the right in this 1902 photograph taken at a boys' reformatory in Baltimore. The record reveals the humble and challenging childhood of the future baseball icon, long before he changed the American game with legendary records. Gathered in 1864, the last veterans of the American Revolutionary War pose for this historical record, each more than 100 years old. The image creates a unique visual bridge between the birth of the United States and the height of the Civil War, preserving the faces of those who fought for independence in the 18th century. Sitting on the lap of magnate John Pierpont Morgan in 1933, circus performer Laia Graf appears in a record used as a publicity move for the banker. While the image softened Morgan's public figure, Laia's fate was tragically shaped by German persecution, ending with her death during that period. The 272-centimeter giant Robert Wadlow, about 8 feet 11 inches tall, greets movie star Mary Pickford in St. Louis. The meeting highlights the striking height difference between the tallest man in history and the actress, serving as a memorable record of Wadlow's public life in Missouri. Maori chief Tomika Temutu displays his detailed facial tattoos, known as ta moko, in the 1870s. The markings represented high status and lineage, serving as a symbol of identity and prestige within Maori culture in New Zealand. This rare photograph shows the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche while he was under medical care in 1899, with a look shaped by isolation. The image reveals the final vulnerability of a brilliant mind as his physical health declined. This striking image from Mongolia in 1956 captures a local athlete displaying raw strength and physical power. It preserves the cultural tradition of weightlifting, highlighting the conditioning and resilience of men in that region during the middle of the 20th century. Intense light and heat pour out from a newly opened crucible at the steelworks of the Meuse Valley in Belgium in the early 1900s. The record captures the monumental and dangerous world of European heavy industry, where workers shaped the steel that would drive 20th century technological progress. Balanced only by a rope, the fearless Mr. Larkin cleans the face of Big Ben with remarkable nerve. This historical record from 1930 preserves the dangerous, careful work required to keep the world's most famous clock running. Under the watchful eye of an American soldier, children jump rope in a light-hearted moment in England in 1944. This scene captures a rare pause of humanity and ease amid the tension of the Second World War, showing interaction between military forces and the local civilian population. A sailor shows off a new addition to the ship in 1910, a small kitten. The record captures a tender moment in seafaring life, where cats were valued not only for companionship, but also for controlling rodents on board. Perfectly preserved in a Danish bog, the Tolland man shows the intact features of a person who lived more than 2,000 years ago. This record of a naturally mummified body offers a deep look into the Iron Age, still holding the calm expression of someone who may have been connected to a ritual of the time. Discovered in 1968 in Jerusalem, Yehohanan's heel bone provided the first direct physical evidence of a Roman punishment in the 1st century. The find includes a bone pierced by an iron nail about 4.5 inches long, still attached to fragments of olive wood. An iron collar with a bronze plate carries a Roman inscription instructing whoever finds the person to seize and return them to Zononis in exchange for a gold coin. The artifact exposes the Roman Empire's system of control, acting as a permanent device to prevent escape and assert ownership over an individual. A page from Einstein's notebook dated 1912 reveals complex calculations and handwritten notes that supported the general theory of relativity. The document shows the physicist's thought process as he worked to understand the curvature of space-time, preserving a draft of one of the greatest scientific revolutions in human history. Captured in 1952 by Raymond Gosling and Rosalind Franklin, Photo 51 revealed the double helix structure of deoxyribonucleic acid through X-ray diffraction. Its X-shaped pattern provided crucial data for Watson and Crick to uncover the code of life, making it one of the most important scientific images in history. A photo by Harry Burton from 1925 shows a rare side view of Tutankhamun's mummy head, recorded shortly after the sarcophagus was opened. The image is part of the documentation of Howard Carter's expedition and highlights the young pharaoh's profile and embalming techniques. Specialists work on deciphering and copying inscriptions at the mortuary temple of Rameses III in 1927. The record details the archaeological effort to document the walls of Medinet Habu, whose hieroglyphs describe military victories and rituals of ancient Egypt, preserving the knowledge of a 1,000-year civilization for the modern world. Archaeologists are shown in 1923 having a meal inside the tomb of Rameses XI in the Valley of the Kings. At the time, Egyptian burial chambers were often used as living spaces and makeshift offices by excavation teams. The obelisk, known as Cleopatra's Needle, is prepared to leave Alexandria for London in 1877. The granite structure was sealed inside a floating iron cylinder called Cleopatra, to be towed by sea in a monumental transport operation that lasted months and faced severe storms in the Bay of Biscay. A monumental 10-story structure connects the imperial palace to the Roman Forum through the imposing ramp of Domitian, built in the 1st century. This private access allowed the emperor to travel between his residence and the administrative heart of Rome with security and architectural grandeur. The Roman mosaic of Zliten, dated to the 2nd century, presents a rich visual story with gladiators, hunts, and public punishments. The work preserves vivid details of social life and intense spectacles of the era, blending entertainment with mosaic art of high technical precision. This magnificent Etruscan war chariot from 530 before Christ displays bronze panels that illustrate scenes from the life of Achilles with rare artistic precision. The piece stands as one of the most significant archaeological finds of the ancient world, combining military function with the refined style of its time. Found at the bottom of a well in Germany, this leather Roman shoe, about 2,000 years old, surprises with its sophisticated design. It features intricate cutouts and decorative patterns that resemble modern footwear, showing that fashion and elegance mattered even on the edges of the Roman Empire. The Lashashin cart found in Armenia is an oak wood vehicle about 4,000 years old. Preserved in a burial mound, it is among the world's oldest examples of wheeled transport, showing advanced Bronze Age engineering. A portrait from 1885 shows a member of the Bald Knobbers, a vigilante group that emerged in the Ozark Mountains after the American Civil War. Wearing horned cloth masks to hide their identities, they enforced their own justice in a region marked by chaos and lawlessness, becoming one of Missouri's most feared militias.